This meeting is now being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Improving Relationships Between Police and the Mental Health Community. Thank you for attending today and bearing with us. The first time that we've used this particular format. We hope it goes well. We're partnering with Keela and sharing this webinar service. So actually, I come up as Jessica Carroll, but I'm actually Oryx Cohen with the National Empowerment Center. So one of the first questions that people usually have is, how do I access this in the future? And yes, this is being recorded, as you probably heard. And the PowerPoint and audio webinar will be posted on our website, which is power2u.org. If you have questions, please use the question and answer function, and you can type in your question. You're invited to ask questions at any time through this question function, and the questions will be taken in the order they are received. So a little bit about the agenda today. Unfortunately, Rebecca Coakley from Disability is unable to make it today, so I will be giving a little bit of background in lieu of her speaking. We also have Dwayne May, Brenda Vizina, Alan Green, and Sergeant John Walsh, followed by question and answer period. Now, I will say that this is a very hot button topic today, and it often is a matter of life and death. And so I please ask that people remain respectful. And we're going to be talking about some difficult things today. We will be, addressing some of the problems head on. And I want you to keep in mind that there are lots of police who are working very hard and doing a very good job. And we are very lucky today to have Sergeant John Walsh on, who is a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So if people could recognize that, and please be respectful. I will not be reading any, disrespectful questions, comments. So please keep it civil, and we're all trying to figure out ways that we can address this problem. So just to give a little bit of background in terms of the bad, and this came out last year, that end up killing someone in mental or emotional crisis about every 36 hours in this country. So it's a huge issue. And over half of all people killed by the police have been diagnosed with some type of, quote, mental illness. So on the flip side, this good news is that when we have forums like this where there can be communication, and when peers have an established relationship with police and or the police are trained in practices such as CIT or emotional CPR, the experience vastly improves and tragedy can be averted oftentimes. So it should be noted that the International Association of Chiefs of Police recommend both CIT and emotional CPR. We're going to be talking a lot more about CIT, so I just wanted to give you the website for emotional CPR, which is right here. And at this point, I want to introduce our first speaker today, who is Dwayne Mays. And Dwayne is currently the coordinator of the Recovery Network of MHA Westchester. Dwayne has worked in the mental health peer industry since 1998, formerly the director of Howie the Harp Advocacy Center. Dwayne has climbed from the bottom of the totem pole to achieve tremendous success both personally and professionally, and is absolute proof that recovery is real. So let's all welcome Dwayne.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I guess everyone's on mute. That's okay. All right. So I am talking about a peer perspective of how to improve relationships between police and the mental health community. And I'm defining peer in the context of an individual who self-discloses a lived experience of receiving mental health support services. I don't know where we are at in the slides because I can't see them right now. So I would like to think that we're at the slide of who and what is the mental health community.
Yes, yep.
Okay. The mental health community is a diverse body of humanity. It's anyone and everyone who at any given time may be experiencing a psychiatric crisis. And mostly it's because of traumas, which may be the result of organic or emotional stressors, which are overwhelming a person's ability to manage. It's at a point where they're not able to cope with things that are happening either internally or as a result of external stimuli. And it could be anyone. Can you see the pictures of individuals who have self-disclosed on the slide and how it represents all of humanity?
Yep, it's up.
Okay. I do see in the public chat that there are no pictures of slides are being shown. And I'm not seeing them on my screen either.
Okay, I just had them up. Okay.
Okay, I think it's trying to come up.
Sorry. To service we're using, and we had just tested it. Oh.
Okay, well, let's move to the next slide.
Okay, I'm having trouble with monitor. I'm not sure.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Trouble with the screen share. Sorry about this. So, one of those things where you test it and it works, and then right now it's not working. Are people seeing the slides or not?
Well, it's kind of whited out.
Okay. Whited out slide.
Yeah, so we can see it in the back of a white screen. So it's not very clear.
Okay. Unfortunately, we might just have to go without slides because it is not. I'm clicking screen share and it's not doing anything. So I think we're just going to have to go forward. And I hear the echo too. I've got everybody muted, so I am trying my best to do sound. Well, I don't think we're using this. Okay, so keep going, Dwayne.
Okay, well, you're just going to miss some very, I like to think, powerful images. Um, for this type of topic, I'm thinking that it's impossible to have a very honest discussion about the relationship between effective policing and the mental health community without really thinking about the impact of stigma, discrimination, and selective law enforcement based on social context. I'm going to describe the graphic, which we unfortunately can't see, but it's indicating that there is selective law enforcement, which shows the intersection of injustice, disability, and human rights. There's two individuals, one white and one black, who are holding a banner which says equal justice. Unfortunately, it's the black individual who's approached and being asked, do you have a permit? Even though they're both holding both sides of the banner. There is a selective law enforcement practice which unfortunately has to be acknowledged, and we've got to realize that it is part of the social context of why certain individuals are treated the way they are when it comes to law enforcement. And to add to that, I just want to remind everyone that in the late 19th century, it was suggested that there was a psychiatric diagnosis of drapetomania, which is defined as a mental illness in which a slave possessed an irrational desire for freedom and a tendency to try to escape. When I learned about that concept in school, I was like, wow, law enforcement does not happen in an objective vacuum, but it's always in a very subjective context of social norms and perceptions. And police practices do change according to current socially acceptable behaviors, beliefs, and laws. When it was suggested that running away from the condition of slavery was a mental illness, it was clear that there had to be someone chasing those slaves down. And they were the precursors to modern-day police officers. The other challenge with any social context is the perceptions that the public have of what is the role of police officers. The public perception is often misguided and based on fear. The idea of an us versus them dichotomy, and it adds to misperceptions and behaviors which can make situations a lot worse. And likewise, social and even law enforcement perceptions of individuals with a mental health diagnosis or experiencing a psychiatric crisis as being a threat or more dangerous than anyone else can often lead to a higher sense of caution or urgency when engaging individuals. One of the things that I've learned from first-hand experience is that most individuals during an emotional crisis, even if they are expressing what could be perceived as being dangerous, they are usually more afraid of what they are experiencing, either internal stimuli, which is causing them to try to protect themselves, or external stimuli, which they are perceiving as a threat, which isn't real. And from a peer perspective, my personal experience, that has always been the case. So, when is an emotional crisis a real threat to public safety? you're not able to see is a hand shadow, which, someone's making, which could look like a rabbit, but it could also be perceived as though it has teeth and looking really scary looking. It depends on your perception of what it is you are looking at. Not every emotionally disturbed person call, not every EVP call is a threat to public safety. Sometimes it is an outcry for help, and other times it may be a need for an assessment of hospitalization or other more clinical interventions. It may be the result of medication side effects or withdrawals, or it could be a normal response to environmental or situational stressors. And I see we have slides now. Is there any way to transition with the slides on it? If not, all right, I'll move on. That being said, it may also be a...
Sorry, Dwayne, I muted myself, and I really apologize for these difficulties. Like I said, this is the first time that we've used this service. So I'm going to try to... Where are you in the presentation?
When is an emotional crisis a threat to public safety? Thank you again, all of the participants, for your patience.
Okay, and I'm going to be working on the sound.
Okay.
I'll
Why don't
fix
you
it out.
click and bring up the pictures? I couldn't resist. That's not me, by the way. Click again. This is the hand shadow which I'm talking about. As I mentioned, it's about perception. The reality is, it's just a hand. But if you are going through an emotional crisis, what you may be experiencing could be received as something a lot different. However, click again. While it's clicked, it may also be a real threat that requires restraint and safety protocols. And I would suggest that it takes very careful assessment of the situation and information about the person who is in crisis in order to really handle the situation in the most effective manner. Next slide. In New York City, there has been instituted a crisis intervention training, which if you're not familiar with, I would suggest that you check out the website to see the incredible work which is being done to inform law enforcement personnel about ways to engage individuals as a result of an EDP call that are essentially non-fatal. There is a level of sensitivity and understanding of how to talk with individuals to diffuse a situation. One of the things I think is important for those of you calling and logging in from around the country is just some geographical information about New York City. New York City has a population of a little more than 8 million individuals, 5 boroughs, approximately 304 square miles. And it has a police force of approximately 34 to 35,000 uniformed officers. And that doesn't include 4,500 auxiliary, 5,000 school safety, and 2,300 traffic enforcement officers. It just gives you a sense of the size of the individuals, the population, and the number of officers that provide law enforcement in a relatively small area. The crisis intervention training has been provided to approximately 550 officers since the summer of last year. We've been very fortunate to have 911 operators, the dispatchers, who can send CIT-trained officers specifically to EDP calls. The goal is for at least 10 times as many to be trained at least within the next 5 to 10 years. Training is voluntary, and law enforcement officers come from different units within public safety. It's 32 hours of training spread over 4 days, and there is a hope to build a jail diversion center in Harlem, South Bronx, or Brooklyn, which have been 3 of the designated areas of the largest number of EDP calls. And they hope to have a CIT training in the NYPD Academy by next year. Next slide.
We have a question. What does EDP stand for?
Emotionally disturbed person.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. In Westchester County, it's a bit different. Westchester County is a lot larger than New York City. Geographically, it covers an area of about 500 square miles, but it's much sparsely populated. It has a population of, as of last year, less than 1 million individuals, citizens, in that 500 square miles. One of the biggest challenges is that there are 45 different local police agencies serving 48 municipalities within that 500 square miles. And each police agency decides who they want to send to a crisis intervention training. It has been running a lot longer than New York City. We've been delivering the CIT training in a regional format since 2006, and approximately 400 officers have been trained over the past 10 years. One of these agencies, New Rochelle, has trained all of their critical incident unit officers as well as patrol officers that might be called to support their critical incident unit. We also have a collaborative initiative with the City of White Plains, which is one of the larger municipalities, and they have a mental health professional embedded within their department, and it's called the Police Mental Health Outreach Team. And it's a co-response model similar to Los Angeles' case assessment management program. And in White Plains, they have over 30% of their officers CIT trained. In the city of Yonkers, in the 4th precinct, there is a mirror collaborative and a co-response model with one county staff member embedded into the 4th precinct. Now, those are the police agencies that I know have done something substantial. But remember, there are 45 in total in the entire county. And there are some departments in smaller towns like Scarsdale where there's only one single officer who's taking the training to become a CIT officer. And as you can imagine, that officer is not able to work 24/7. So it is a challenge for the 911 dispatchers to locate that same officer at all times. We've run classes in other counties, Orange, Putnam, Dutchess, which are regional, also in Ulster and the Bronx. And just last week, we recently had a CAT training in the Police Academy of Westchester. And when I spoke with the officers there, next slide, please. Art. Next slide. There were some suggestions. An expansion of academy training. Most officers who attend the CIT trainings both in New York City and Westchester County are essentially voluntold that this is a training which could benefit them. Most of them are already seasoned officers, and the suggestion is that it's included as a part of academy training so that cadets are exposed to ways to engage individuals who are involved in an emotional crisis. There should be an increased collaboration with mobile crisis teams that are usually jointly administered with the County Department of Mental Health. There should be more officers trained in CIT engagement, and an enhanced ability for 911 dispatchers to locate trained officers immediately. And the final suggestion was that there should be feedback from the first responders of what's working, what isn't, when the rubber hits the road. When they have to respond to an EDP call, what was going on, what did they experience, and what suggestions do they have? I think some of these suggestions would add to what we're talking about today, which is improving the outcomes and relationships between police and the mental health community. There's a lot of work to do, and I'm very, very glad that there's so many individuals committed to doing things a bit better. And I believe that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. And again, apologize for the technical issues. The PowerPoint will be available on our website separately, so you'll have access to those first few slides that were not showing up for you at the beginning of the presentation. I want to thank Dwayne for a great presentation and also for bearing with the technical issues. It sounds like it may have been an issue with Dwayne's phone. That was the echo, because I'm not hearing an echo right now. If we could get some feedback on whether it's sounding better, that would be great. And we will move on to our next presenter. Oh, sounds good. Sounds better now. Okay. So we may not do away with this. We may not blame the format entirely. It might be the users who need to learn how to use it as well. So thanks again, Dwayne. And our next speaker is Brenda Vizina. And Brenda is a licensed social worker with 25 years plus in the field and a trauma survivor. Brenda is executive producer of the Voice Award Honorable Mention documentary, What Happened to You?, which speaks to the causes and effects of childhood trauma and the relationship to public health issues. Under her leadership, the Central Mass Recovery Learning Community offers a variety of professional trainings that are well respected and sought after in Central Mass and beyond, including trauma-informed services, health and social equity, and professionalism in the peer workforce. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you so much for it. This is really innovative work, albeit challenging, right? So thank you so much. So we're here in Worcester, Massachusetts. A recovery learning community is really what the name is people in community learning about recovery. There's a lot of people that come to our center, the Keela Center, and have been diagnosed with a mental health or substance abuse condition. And we are operating as a peer organization. We, the staff here, have all self-disclosed our diagnosis to others, whether we believe in it or we haven't. We really want to even the playing field between people using the service and people providing. It's often really confusing because it's a community. So we have one resource center, which is here in Worcester, called Keela, and then the community, which is called Central Mass Recovery Learning Community. We cover 52 cities and towns in central Massachusetts. And how we do that is that people who use the Recovery Learning Community use a training to become people that run meetings to stretch our reach around the state. So people come, they give, they take, and the mutuality continues to grow and grow and grow. When we began to work in crisis in the local hospitals, we began to see a trend about the police force being really involved heavily with people who might have been hearing something on the street or appearing as if they were hearing something that wasn't there, or maybe doing something that wasn't necessarily against the law, but might have been frightening to someone, or people that were calling 911 and saying someone was perhaps spying on them or having some kind of problem. And the police force actually came to us because we met them in a peer crisis mode. We were in a hospital taking somebody that wanted to be checked out. We were just being with the person, and the police met us there. And so how that works for us is we began to do with the CIT program, Crisis Intervention Program, and the rest of the police force, we've been able to do trauma-informed and trauma sensitivity training. And we've demonstrated, and we're beginning to write a paper about it, that working together with the RLC and the police lessens the trauma that a person will experience. Now that sounds pretty common sense, but it isn't always. Many police officers do not or have not stated that they understand that handcuffing can be traumatic, or being in the back of the car, or the lights, or even the approach. And they've been really open to hearing about what that might feel like. So the leaders have really seen that our relationships and sharing lived experience has actually led to many police officers coming for groups in the community that talk about post-traumatic stress, and they share their lived experience of post-traumatic stress. So it's become a very humanizing relationship. It's also been easier for people to access services because they've given out our cards, or they've called us to come and see someone that's either on the street or over at the library. We get a lot of calls to the library. Here seems to be a place where a lot of people hang around on the front steps. And so sometimes they'll ask people if they want to take a ride over and check us out, and they have a plain car and plain clothes, and they'll do that. So it often will avoid a 911 call or a hospital, intervention. And I agree. I see someone saying here in the chat box that the lights are surprisingly traumatic, and that has been really stated to the police if we could try really hard not to use that in these situations. And they have definitely agreed that they didn't understand it before in this situation. We're not saying light shouldn't be used ever. We're saying when we're trying to be trauma sensitive and assist a person in a situation of mental health crisis or substance abuse crisis, we want to try to use no lights. Next slide, please, Oryx.
And we also had a question, what is Kiva?
Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, thank you for that. So Kiva, thank you for that. The Kiva Center is that we discovered the word Kiva, meaning from the Hopi Indians, meaning going down into yourself and coming out healed. So we based it on self-determination in a peer-to-peer program. We rely on self-determination as well as the mutuality and the peer support in the program. We have to keep ourselves in charge of ourselves. So that's really what Kiva means, going down into yourself and coming out healed. So the next slide talks about the trusting relationships between uniformed police. We've had a lot of work with the crisis intervention team. They don't wear the same clothes. They don't show badges or anything like that. But the uniformed police and the mental health community, there's still a challenge there. And so that challenge is not for the police only. That's also for us to, we continue to work in our peer movement about not being, as afraid to really address the trauma of why we're afraid and to think about that fear when it comes up. I know that sounds like pretty clinical or, common sense, but it's really about trying to make that less and less and less of a trigger as time goes on, because they're going to wear uniforms in most instances. But the PTSD, the way we're working with the police, a lot of the police force has said that they have post-traumatic stress disorder from some of the things that they've seen and heard. So coming at it from the police calling themselves equal people with different roles. So even if I'm in a psychiatric crisis, I'm still an equal person, but I have a different role, and the police person has a different role. And that's not a normal perspective a lot of times for people in power, and I find that the CIT program is reaching to that new stretch goal of reducing the power differential and really talking about the humane way of treating people that are in trouble or in peril. And I've watched the situations here in Worcester and central Massachusetts be reduced very, very, very quickly, right before our eyes. Actually, when the power differential and the approach is sensitive. One approach is about standing 3 feet from the person and then asking, can I move a little closer? I'm not going to touch you or anything, but can I move a little closer so we can hear each other? And as opposed to being right in that person's face and escalating when you don't even, perhaps, no one needs to do that. So when we're not even intending to, personal space during crisis is of extreme value. So they are really working very hard to approach slowly and calmly, and that perspective is working for us. Go ahead, Oryx. So we're talking, that photo was about, do we know that so many times trauma is what's behind what's happening in the world? You know, the link between childhood trauma and substance use is about 87%. For people who are self-reporting on the ACE study, similarly to the Kaiser Permanente research, it continues to be 87%, even higher than obesity and trauma. Next slide. So 2/3 is people with substance abuse report being abused as children. That's also a really tough thing to talk about. But we want to make sure that we're not creating more and more of a war on people who are oppressed. It's our position here at the recovery learning community that the war on drugs is a war on people in trauma. 95% of the people here at the Central Mass RLC talk about their trauma, and therapists and doctors told us not to, and we don't mind being unpopular in that way because we don't feel as if we can get far enough with our recovery, with the police, with substance abuse, and with mental health dollars without talking about what we believe is at the basis of many things, which is trauma. And we're trying to talk about it in a way that reduces things, reduces symptoms, reduces behavior, reduces arrest, and builds on the people's power and their own resilience. Often when we're exposing our truth in a non-judgmental, non-confrontational way, we can be heard and things can dissipate, not feel as hot. And that's the way that here at the Central Mass Recovery Learning Community we talk about it with our peer community and with the police, with the doctors and with the therapists. Again, they warn us not to talk about trauma all the time. They don't have any power over us. We still talk about it, and we've had great results still talking about it. Go ahead, Alex. So often we talk about an atmosphere of self-awareness and self-care in our communities when we talk with the police, also about their safety. So we even the playing field talking, recognizing that they often feel unsafe. And we go to our neighborhood meetings. So we are good neighbors. When we moved in here, we're on a very prestigious road in Worcester. It's called Shrewsbury Street. Shrewsbury Street is a primarily Italian neighborhood full of restaurants, just full. And people come from all over our state and out of the state to eat on this street, especially on the evenings and weekends. So we have visibility. We're right in the middle of it all. So in order to be in the middle of it all, our peer community needs to be good neighbors. So we make sure that we go to the neighborhood association meeting. We go to the restaurants. We're not just asking for things. We're helping. We participate in all the neighborhood functions. Next week we have the Taste of Shrewsbury Street. We march in the parades. We blend into our neighborhood rather than stigmatizing ourselves with our mental health diagnosis, substance abuse diagnosis, or trauma diagnosis. We really talk a lot. We've already spoken about the plain clothes, but the no badges and no weapons policy here at the Recovery Learning Community was a really hot topic with the police, let me tell you. And only being able to come to our center in an unmarked car because there are people inside that also don't want to see police pulling up outside. We don't want lights, we don't want that, and we certainly don't want you to walk in with your all of your weapons, etc., exposed. So that was a hot button for a long time. They've now come in the fashion of no guns, weapons, badges, any of that. And we've had this happening for about 4 years, and it's working out just wonderful. We are continuing our work. We're now finally spreading the work into Southbridge, which is 17,000 people, 90% Spanish speaking, and only the police force is about 10% Spanish speaking. So we need a lot of work there. Next slide, please. We're also people that here at the Recovery Learning Community have asked the question, what happened to you, as opposed to the question, what's wrong with you, in a way to seriously find out from people what happened, what's going on. And I know that can be controversial sometimes, Some therapists say, well, we're opening a can of worms. Some people think don't ask any questions. From our perspective, what happened to you humanizes the actual question and doesn't place the person that's struggling into a victim role with what's wrong with you as a part of being broken. And that connection really helps with a positive outcome. And really, I'm talking about this, and I spoke about this with the police. We've been going around to local colleges with young people, and the Blue Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter, the All Lives Matter groups. We've joined them, and we're talking about language mattering and the impact of language. And the question, what happened to you, as opposed to what's wrong with you, has really been able to lower the temperature in some situations. And as long as you're willing to listen, you know, we have kind of a rule here. If I walk by someone and say, how are you, I better stop and look at them and wait for the answer. If I don't have time to do that, I just have to say hello and walk by. But really the impact of how we're treating each other with language is very important, particularly in these multicultural conflicts where we have more white police that don't speak any other language except English, and they're on the patrol in a primarily Spanish-speaking neighborhood. That's happening here in Worcester. It's happening in Southbridge, and people are being arrested and not even understanding what's happening. So we have many Spanish speakers here that are assisting in multicultural. We have Spanish, Portuguese, and signers who are assisting with making the CIT program have access to multicultural peer support. I think that's the end of our presentation, or we have a few more slides for it.
No, that's the
not
end.
Me. That's the end, Sue. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoyed participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda, and please stick around for the very important question and answer period.
Absolutely.
I want to thank everyone for bearing with us here. We had a bit of a rocky start with this, and it seems like we have the technical issues pretty much figured out at this point. We'll see when we can fix Dwayne's audio for the question and answer. But it's also good to see Dwayne active on the chat as well. For the most part, you guys have stuck with it through the technical issues. You haven't left us. This is a very important issue, so we really appreciate that. Want to continue to encourage you to use the question and answer function. We have a nice amount of questions coming in that we'll get to after our last presentation. And so right now I want to welcome Alan Green and Sergeant John Walsh. So Alan Green, MPA, is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Nebraska, Nebraska's first and only peer-run mental health service provider, although he is leaving next month to go up to direct Choices in Alaska. So Nebraska will miss him, and Alaska is going to welcome Alan. Programming includes the HOPE program. This is at MHA Nebraska, which is EBP-supported employment, the Keela House, which is a peer respite, Hanu Home, which is a peer respite specifically for those transitioning from the state correction system, and statewide wellness recovery, education, and advocacy. Mr. Green and MHA Nebraska have developed a positive relationship with the local police department, and Mr. Green will be presenting with one of the police officers he works with, which is Sergeant John Walsh. A little bit about John. John received a BA from the University of Kansas in 1992 and has been a police officer since 1995, serving 3 years with the Kansas City PD and the last 15 at the Lincoln Police Department. In 2005, John was promoted to rank of sergeant and currently serves as the Southeast Team Detective. John also serves as the liaison between the Lincoln Police and the mental health providers and consumers, and is definitely a part of the solution. So welcome to both you, Alan, and Sergeant Walsh.
Thanks, Lawrence. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. No echo.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to rely on you to tell us what slide we're on, because we still have never been able to get into the program.
Okay, we're on the cover slide. An effective partnership, the ultimate win-win.
That's great. Yeah, and thanks for giving that kind of overview of where we are and what we're doing, what the services we provide. I want to get right into the point of this presentation, and that's developing the relationship, the very effective and meaningful relationship with local law enforcement. And in doing that, we've focused on in pretty much two different areas. One is cross-training between our staff and other providers with law enforcement, and also law enforcement learning about how we do things and effective ways to respond. And then we'll talk about our program, the real program, which is our crisis response and community outreach program that is in direct connection with the Lincoln Police Department. Next slide.
Okay.
Great. So first in training, I'll let John talk about the law enforcement end. But for us, about 6-7 years ago, the local regional authority and law enforcement started a behavioral health threat assessment program for law enforcement. We got involved because of just the title, if nothing else. I was like, wait a minute, what's this threat stuff? And soon saw what it was all about, and we've been a meaningful part of this training ever since. And what it does is that it helps the officers understand and gives them tools on how to approach people that may be behaving a little bit differently than most folks, not to jump to conclusions, how to reach out to local support and stuff like that. And then we're also now with our program with the Department of Corrections, teaching trauma recovery and resiliency training for correctional officers, and then also doing RAP and trauma training in some of the prisons with some of the inmates. So with that, I'll let John kind of talk about some of the interactions with the training component between our program and our folks and the Lincoln Police Department.
All right, yeah, to expand on what Alan said about the behavioral health and threat assessment training, we have some fairly good, some internationally renowned people here in Lincoln that are able to speak on people and truly when they are dangerous. And the biggest thing they stress is that there is a point where people are dangerous, but that point is very small. Just because you have a mental illness or you have issues going on that are making you not making you appear to be something that you probably normally aren't, that you're truly not dangerous. I mean, those people fall into a very small area. So that kind of gives us a little bit of relief going into it, knowing that, most of the time everything's going to end up safe and everybody's going to be okay. And part of that training is the peers from MHA and people they've helped will show up and talk about what it's like to have, as they go through the different diagnoses, how their depression treated them and what it felt like for them and what made them, respond better, or, things that would trigger their depression or anxiety or whatever the case may be. So it really humanized it for us. Probably one of the most powerful moments or hour of that training is when the peers tell their story. And a lot of them get up there and tell things that I don't know I would tell anybody, but yet they're telling a room full of 50 to 60 police officers. And it's very powerful and it's very moving because they truly share what it was like for them to have the issues and deal with those issues, things that helped and things that didn't help. And we really learn a lot from that and take away a lot from that. And we earn a lot of respect for the people telling us that story because we know it was difficult to tell. And it really helps foster a relationship. And then on on top of it, it shows a lot of these folks are in recovery or working towards recovery. It shows us that there are good outcomes that can be had, and it's not just constantly dealing with what we get sent to, which is always when somebody's having a bad day. Nobody calls us to tell us they're having a good day, or that rarely happens. So for us, that's a big deal. As far as the peers go, we have started involving them in our academy instruction for not only law enforcement officers, but for dispatchers. So we'll have them come out and, again, explain what it's like, to have experienced a different type of mental illness, or, things that work for them, or things that might trigger them to give officers and dispatchers a better understanding of what's going on. And I think we're trying to press it's the issue that it's not, mental illness. It's not what the press makes it out to be, this big scary thing. It's more of just, it's an illness. So it's no different than a physical ailment like cancer or, glaucoma, or it's just something that person has kind of been given to deal with. And, there's things we can do to help them, and it humanizes the person a lot more, realizing that it's just something that they have, not something that they asked for or dealt or necessarily, put upon themselves. So, that's a big step in helping us kind of take it down a notch when we're helping folks out and realize that, it's just somebody that needs help.
We're having some comments that it's a little bit difficult to hear. So if you guys, if it's not too hard, take yourself off speakerphone and put the phone right up to your ear. If that's not going to affect you too much, you might come in better.
Sure. Do you want us to clarify anything from the last one, from the last bit of comments there?
I think they could hear you okay. Now that's much better. That's
okay.
Much better.
Yeah, we were on speakerphone, so we'll do this way. But just to conclude, we've really involved the peers in our training from the get-go. I mean, the officers have access to the peers that are not only able to explain what services they can offer and the things they've done to help, but again, they make it just add a face to what we're, the problems we're going to be addressing and how we can best help people, and realizing that, it's just somebody that needs help, and it's not, what the media and what culture presents it to be. So, and again, peers are also in our in-service training. They come in and talk and remind folks, of what they can do, and we share stories, success stories, and sometimes stories that, maybe weren't a success but got somebody to a level of maybe where they're not dealing with the police anymore and more dealing with folks that can help them out in a positive way. So, next slide. Are you there?
Yep.
All right. The REAL program is a program that started about 4 years ago. It's a collaboration between the Lincoln Police Department and the Mental Health Association. It stands for Respond, Empower, Advocate, and Listen. That name was actually brought up by a party that we've served through the REAL program. And it's a proactive approach to dealing with issues. We don't want it to get to a crisis level. With the REAL program, we'll make a referral kind of anywhere along the spectrum, from somebody maybe we're noticing having a bad day or having, maybe a hard time dealing with a loss, to maybe somebody that has just been placed into emergency protective custody, which is where law enforcement in Nebraska are allowed to take people into custody if they're dangerous to themselves or others, and providing them some sort of services through the REAL program, providing them somebody that's, a human to contact them afterwards and say, hey, what do you need? What can we do for you? So that often softens the outcome of that. The next slide here is some of our results. In those past years, we've had referred over 1,311 people, and that was in February, so I'm sure that's much higher by now. Of those, they get a hold of about 60% of them, and some of those folks that we're making referrals on are either homeless or, don't want to be contacted, and the peers respect that. And of those 60%, though, about 58% or 452 of that 782 took up services from the REAL program. And so there's a lot of people that when they're ready to get help and when they're kind of needing somebody to walk with, have somebody there. The big thing is that 302 Lincoln police officers have made referrals
I know that earlier Dwayne was talking about 34,000 police officers. Well, we only have 324, and we have a city of about 300,000. So we're kind of understaffed at times, and so often we have to make the most of with what we've got. And so for 302 out of 324 officers to make referrals, I think we have a lot of buy-in in the department. Most times we can't get 3 cops to agree on anything, so to get 302 to agree that this is a good program is a big boost of confidence to Alan and his group, and shows that we really respect the work they're doing. And again, some of the services they've supplied and some of the relationships between the peer workers and police and ultimately the person involved, if they allow it, you know, a lot of times it can last for years, and you know, they'll stick with the person. It's not a quick one and done. It's, you know, how long the person wants them to be involved, number one, and you know, it's ongoing. So that's something positive here.
And then we have quotes.
I'm sorry.
And I clicked to the next slide with some quotes.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just wanted to add, because there was some discussion earlier about the crisis intervention teams. Lincoln chose not to go that route, and I think, and not wanting to speak for LPD, but I think they saw the benefit in training all officers in this sort of stuff instead of relying on just a select group to have to respond. And so our program merged into that, and I think that's been the true effective collaboration through this whole thing. Yeah, and with this next slide with the quotes, you guys can read it, but we got it from the past chief of police, what he thought about what it was all about, and then some other officers. Tom Cassidy, who's the public safety director for the city, was the police chief for 20 years, 25 years before taking that job. So, you know, we have the big thing to take away out of this is the meaningful collaboration and how we work together to solve problems instead of, you know, chewing on each other. And so that's really the takeaway, I think, is that we're all trying to get to the same place. We're all trying to get people to where they need to be, a safe place where they're getting the services or the support that they need, and how to do that without causing more problems. So I believe that's the end of. Yeah, there's just some more quotes on the last slide too. So with that, I think we'll probably go to any questions if there are any.
Wow, thank you so much. We're getting a lot of comments in. It's just so inspiring to hear about this collaboration you have. And then we have a lot of questions that have come in as well. So we're going to go through these kind of in the order that they came in. And we purposely set out 2 hours for this so that we could have a healthy dialogue. So again, if you could use the question and answer function, the chat function, this will be available later if you have to leave. But so this is being recorded and we'll post it on our website. I am unmuting the rest of our speakers here, and we'll get to some of these questions, and we'll see if we can maybe fix Dwayne's audio we were having before. So I'm just going to unmute Dwayne too. Okay, so we have Dwayne back.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Thank you to all our presenters, and let's start in with some of the questions as they came in. So, first question is, what do you suggest to people who are trying to engage officers in collaboration, especially those who are very much against getting educated or involved? I think she's talking about the officers who are against being educated or being involved. So what do you suggest to people who are trying to engage officers in collaboration?
You know, I think the biggest thing is to come to them and kind of explain what's going on or what services you guys can offer. And I think a lot of times it's just kind of not knowing on our side, you know, what the issues may be or what things that we can do to collaborate. A lot of times, too, I've noticed working here in the community, when we first started working with the REAL program, I started, and we kind of use them a little creative. We think outside the box. We tend to use it, say if somebody needs substance abuse help and they can't get into treatment, or maybe they're going to that appointment, I would take them with me to a traditional provider and say, hey, these are peers that we work with. And I think initially we were met with some skepticism. I know raised eyebrows at the very least, and they had no real understanding what the peers could do for us. And so when we explained what they can do, and I could give them a couple of success stories of things that they've done to help, they were a lot more willing to engage the peers. And I think, you know, if you have examples or you have things that you've done to help maybe an officer on a call, or maybe you know, inadvertently became involved in a call that involves law enforcement, take that time to build the relationship and just talk. I mean, once we get over realizing neither party is scary, we find out that we have a lot in common, and we can tend to build on those strengths.
Thank you, John. And would you say that if you have one connection in the police department, that can be really valuable because that police officer can kind of serve as a spokesperson or kind of a liaison? So if you could even just get one good connection within the department, then that could maybe go a long ways.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation. I mean, we were fortunate here to have a party that's now the director of safety for Lincoln Public Schools, and he's the one that really started our progression in a positive direction. From, you know, when he first started, 50% of the time we were taking people into custody, and now, you know, that's way down. I mean, we're down to probably 20% of the time, if that. And so it's made a major impact on not only people we're helping, but also we just would have plain out run out of services available because we just don't have that much to help that many people. So one person can go a long way in developing a program.
Thanks. Another question from the panelists, the presenters? Okay, let's move on to the next question, which is, it was said that there are challenges. What's that? It was said that there are challenges with the officers. What challenges do you see the clinicians having?
Can you clarify that one?
Yeah, if Shireen, if you're still on, you could clarify what you mean by that. That would be great. Okay, let's move on to another one. I think that the approach of the officers should be addressed. Is that approach of officers? So, do you want to talk about how your approach has changed in terms of how you would address situations based on your collaboration?
Yeah, I think we see our approach to these issues is not. Before it was we would get called out. I mean, it could be something as small as just repetitive loud music, and not understanding why that person maybe is playing their music loud. I know we have one person that plays it to deal with the voices, and kind of once we got through that and we understood that was what was going on, we realized this wasn't somebody that was just kind of being hard to deal with or being obstinate and not listening to what we said and, you know, working towards a ticket because we didn't want to give them a ticket for disturbing the peace. But once we realized that, we realized there was other ways we could address that issue, and we realized that, you know, we're not therapists, so you know, we have a lot of other groups in town other than the peers, and she happened to be a client of one of those, and we were able to get her in touch with her group, and they kind of work with her, and and help deal with that problem. And a lot of times, even though she might be a client of a specific group, we'll try to wrap a peer around them as well, so they have that, you know, friendly face they can contact when they're having some issues.
Great. And I know that some of the other presenters addressed this as well, like Brenda. Brenda was talking about, you know, how much of an impact the bright lights of the police car can be on people, and if possible to not, you know, to have plainclothes police officers as well, because some of that stuff can be triggering for folks. So those are some other ideas that were thrown out. Anybody else want to comment on this one about more effective approach for police officers?
Oryx, this is Alan. I would jump in real quick. Excuse me. Well, a couple of years ago, we were helping establish a peer program in the local hospital here that has a psych department, emergency psych department, and then the psychiatric wards. And we finally got our peers in there, and we're working with the nurses and everything else. And what we were very, very effective at was but not only engagement, but also turning down the heat on an issue when the person is really aggravated. And what ended up happening, because there's generally a law enforcement officer there at the hospital, the nurses would come in and go, "Could you help work with this person?" And the officer would say, "No, I'll go in after the peer that goes in." And then he would stand around the corner so he wasn't standing in the doorway in his uniform, knowing that that would just set the situation off. So it's that type of a collaboration, even with the hospital, that has since been developed that I think has been the benefit to everybody in the community.
Great. All right, let's move on to the next one. Now, Brenda and Dwayne, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here, listening.
I'm still on, Oryx. I just want to add to that last comment is that with our CIT group and with the rest of the Worcester police, we're really talking about the use of language. And it's been quite funny, actually, to bring peers into the police department. And we almost speak two different languages when we first meet up. And then as we sit there and understand language, I mean language about a situation, we often can lower the way people will respond. So I appreciate what everyone said, and that I also really appreciate that, you know, the way we talk to each other can really matter in the heat of the moment. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is how much training is offered to police officers in terms of post-traumatic stress?
I can only speak for the Lincoln experience, but initially during the initial academy, we'll give them some training on that, and then during the beta training, we go a little more in depth. I think there's always some continual training through in-services. We'll have people come in and speak, and then just kind of on-the-job training, learning what that is to deal with, and speaking with peers. A lot of times when we call or we email and talk to them, they'll kind of give their bit on what it is like, and be able to explain things better to us. So it really opens our eyes, through communication. I think is probably the biggest thing between the peers and the officers, to learn about the different issues that are going on with folks and the best ways to handle those.
Thank you. And this is also related kind of to the next question, which she's asking, I'm new to this, what is CIT? And my issue with CIT is that it comes mainly from a medical model, and so this whole issue of trauma can go unaddressed because there's lots of us who don't consider what we have or what we go through as any type of quote-unquote illness, but as reaction to severe trauma, that we're trauma survivors. And Brenda talked about this in her presentation. But CIT, despite that shortcoming in my view, CIT has had a lot of good results. So does someone who's more familiar with CIT just want to explain what it is?
This is Dwayne. Can everyone hear me?
And what does it stand for? First thing, what does it stand for?
Crisis intervention training. And it's a model, it's an evidence-based practice model which has been adopted by many police forces around the nation to provide I'm just going to say it's a level of sensitivity and awareness of mental health challenges and the experiences that individuals have when they're going through an emotional crisis, to help police officers approach the situation differently than they would from a strictly criminal engagement.
Right. Thank you.
And as was mentioned, a psychiatric disorder it's an illness. It's defined as an illness, so it's not, just someone choosing to, behave or experience certain things. It's just, a part of who they are, which, can be unnerving to the uninformed. And just even having that awareness can make a big difference in how situations are approached.
Yeah, I think whether you define the issue as resulting from trauma or some sort of illness, that the important thing is that the person is experiencing something for a reason, and they're a human being, and there's not this big mystery going on, and they're not, like people have talked about, it's not most oftentimes not going to be a dangerous situation. And so it's really great to hear about how the Lincoln Police Department has been working with these situations. And you can just see when you start to put some of these principles into practice that you would get really positive results, which is great.
I do want to share something. I mentioned that last week I was at the Westchester County Police Academy as a part of the crisis intervention training that was going on. And I kept hearing someone say, "Hi, neighbor, hi, neighbor." And I looked, and yes, it was actually my next door neighbor, who is a Mount Vernon County, a Mount Vernon town uniformed police officer, and I didn't know it. And she sat through my presentation, and she texted me, and she texted my wife, and she came over to the house that evening, and she said that my presence really made such an impact, because to her, I was just a good neighbor, and I live in a very suburban neighborhood, and she never associated me with having any type of a diagnosis, a lived experience of a psychiatric disorder, none of that. And then she said that it changed her perception of what it means to have that diagnosis, that label. That, they're not, we're not different from any other human being. So her relationship with me was first as a neighbor, just, a regular guy. And it helped change her perception of those folks that she may get that EDP call on. Yes,
thank you for sharing that, because there really is no us and them. We all are human beings and have these experiences on some level, so we can relate to each other. And the more that we have these conversations, the more that we'd be able to realize that the other is not the bad guy. So There's, yes.
This is Brenda. I would like to say that as a result of getting to know the CIT people, and I will say that in the beginning it wasn't as easy as it might sound. There was some resistance, and then we just kept building the relationship, showing up, like I said, being in the hospital emergency room, seeing the same officers, you know, making our presence known. That's kind of how we had to start because the first phone call wasn't that warm. But we kept doing that. The other thing I just want to say is in the 2 years that we've been working together, the police department itself came and learned how to facilitate peer support meetings and runs their own peer support meetings for police officers struggling with PTSD. So they've learned by their own admission and their own support of their own peers in their service system about PTSD. So I think, you know, they got that OJT, like someone, I think Alan might have said that, or Dwayne, but they've also got a personal experience happening as a result from our relationship.
I'd like to step in and comment on what Dwayne said. I noticed that happened a lot with me. You know, when we work with the peers, we develop some pretty good relationships. And, you know, I don't think of them as a person with diagnosis X or with, you know, this past. And, you know, some of the folks have been in prison, and, you know, police officers and people that have been in prison usually don't collaborate or haven't in the past too much. And that's not how I see those folks. I see them as their name and what, you know, they're doing now and the positive things they're doing and not the bad things that they've said in their past. So I really want to say that's humanized it a lot for me, and I agree with Dwayne that it's very powerful.
Yeah, because you mentioned before that the police are seeing people at their worst for the most part. So if we can, you know, as peers approach police when we're doing well and you know, start to develop those relationships, they begin to see us in a different light, and that just improves the relationship. So let me get to some other questions. Just a lot of positive responses about what you guys are doing, and people wanting to bring you to their area of the country. You guys might be getting some phone calls and emails and, you know, requesting you to come out and help them out. One question was, are officers given incentive to complete CIT, or we can even just extend that to your program, the REAL program? Is there any incentives given to going through this training?
Yeah, the only incentive we have is if you make a referral, your name goes into a hat, and you get asked to the quarterly meeting. So really, no. It's all done because people care and because officers want to see better outcomes for the people they're helping out.
And okay, the next question is, what data has been collected on the effect of having these officers trained? You mentioned some data, right? For Lincoln.
Yeah. We've done several studies, and the last one we did was pretty interesting. They compared all of the people that had been referred, and then they compared those that had accepted services against those who hadn't. And we found that they were about 50% less likely to be the subject of a mental health investigation, which is our terminology for going out and investigating a call where maybe mental health is the overriding issue of that call. And then they were also 50% less likely to receive any citation or arrest in the next year. So we're finding that it's really helping folks and getting them past the problem there, or past that hard time.
Awesome. Okay, I'm getting to some.
Parks,
go ahead.
Jump in real quick. We've been also trying. See, our program is funded through a local foundation, and that term is starting to end. We have one more year. And so the crew has been working very closely with the city, with the mayor and the city council and everything else. And it looks like we've convinced them that it's worthwhile, that the city actually pays to keep this program going.
Yeah, and as far as people's questions about wanting to stay in touch with the presenters, this presentation, again, will be available on our website. And so the contact information that they've given are on the slides. And if you're still having trouble connecting with the presenters, you can just contact us at the National Empowerment Center, and we will facilitate those connections, because we would really like to see similar programs being developed all over the place. So let's get to some other questions. If I am in an encounter with a police officer, what's a good way to establish that I'm not getting proper support, and that's why there isn't good conversation? What's a good way to communicate with the police?
Okay.
Hi, Brenda, can you ask that again?
Sure. If I am in an encounter with a police officer, what's a good way to establish that I'm not getting proper support, and that's why there isn't good conversation?
Oh, I see. Okay. I mean, we rehearse some scenarios here at the RLC Keela Center about trying to just lay out what we call a power statement. We did it with doctors where when you go to a psychiatric appointment, sometimes you only get the 15-minute visit and they're writing the prescription and not listening. So we have these, what we do is rehearse some power statements that are respectful, and we have like a couple of one-liners that we use. I'm not trying to be offensive. I just need some help. Do you know any way to help me? I mean, we keep it really simple. I mean, that's what we've done actually right in front of our building this morning. I saw that encounter. So go ahead.
You know, from my perspective, I'd say just like she said, just tell the truth and just say what's going on. Say what's, you know, get to the root of the matter, because we're going to ask those follow-up questions. You know, that's just kind of what we do, and we're going to try to be respectful about it. But lay it out for us. Let us know what's going on, and we'll try to get you to where we need to get you.
Thanks.
I believe that often a societal norm is to assume that the police know more about the service system and expect a little too much. I know that we've had this conversation many times where police say, I have no idea what you do, you know, or where to offer them. We're building up the information and referral cards that we leave with police officers, because they are, and often in the middle of the night, they have a hard time helping someone, and it becomes a hospitalization or something. And so we're building up the down and dirty, quick and simple information and referral cards for them to either hand to somebody or use on their own if they have the time.
Thank you. We have a lot of comments coming in asking about incentives for police officers, which sounds like a great idea. So it's something that we could advocate for, I think, but it doesn't sound like a lot of departments have those incentives built in, which could make it more challenging to get some of these trainings to happen. But you know, with persistence and a connection here or there, you know, anything is possible. As you're seeing is happening in Lincoln, we can make it happen in other places.
Yeah, Oryx. One of the comments we get, you know, I mean, the incentives, when we first got the program going, like John was saying before, the person that really got this thing going with LPD was kind of ponying up a free dinner, you know, just to get people to try us out. But really right now, what we get, the feedback we get, the biggest benefit is that the officers know that there's a handoff to somebody that's going to help this person, and that they're not going to have to keep going out there and dealing with the person. You know, they can get on to do, you know, cop stuff instead of mental health stuff. And that's probably the biggest thing. And that's what the city is seeing too, is that we are freeing up the officers' time sufficiently that it's in the city's best interest to make sure this program is going, because then the officers can go out and do, you know, the job that we really hired them to do. So that's probably the biggest incentive that I've heard.
Okay, thank you. And so the next question may need some interpretation here. Police interactions are not covered by HIPAA. That makes it harder to self-disclose. What are things that are used to show that people are not stigmatized in the community via public radio calls or similar? So does that mean, what can you do in the police department to not out people? Is that what they're getting at? Is that how you read that?
Yes, Arts. The real program, our communication back and forth with the officers is by email, by encrypted email. But you know, I was just talking with John, and you know, when a call goes out through dispatch, you know, there could be some information, but then they don't generally give any identification, any identifying information. It's more an individual at such and such is experiencing such and such.
Yeah, so they're not outing people, I guess.
We're very, very sensitive to that, and like I said, all our email communications are encrypted, and when we respond to the officer's initial email that has the contact information on it, when we respond, we do not attach that original email to our response to try to sever any other possibility of any other identification going out. And then we might use a first name or initials and not full names. So, you know, trying to stay on top of that. Again, for our staff, for the peers in the program, I mean, they definitely are very sensitive to that, because they easily could be the person on the referral. So it's been very effective for the years that we've been doing it. We haven't had any blowback or any kind of problem that's arisen from that.
Awesome. Well, I guess a specific question for you, Alan, is because you are transferring to Anchorage next month. Because a lot of people on this call are thinking about, or on the webinar, are thinking about trying to do something similar in their community. So what would be your first step as you transition to Anchorage to do something similar in Anchorage?
Well, obviously, the first thing is to go and visit them, go talk, go in for coffee, you know, just try to form a relationship, a very positive relationship. Choices has actually a Housing First ACT team, and so there's already connections that way through the homeless issues and everything else. But that's basically what I was looking at doing initially right out of the gate, was just go talk to them. You know, I mean, that we all benefit from communication, and then see what's going on, you know, just see where we can help, and definitely not walk into the room with all the answers, because every community is different. Their issues are different. Their resources are different. Their ability to respond is different. So, you know, don't go in there knowing everything. Don't go in there demanding anything. Go in asking questions as to how we can work together to make the situation as effective as possible. Because again, we're in this for the same thing. You know, we're in this to help people get whatever it is they need to get, and then get on with their lives. It's really, I don't see it as being any more complicated than that.
Thank you. So, next question. In this community, we have had a lot of problems with police who don't understand that these clients have mental health and substance abuse problems, and they treat these individuals poorly, what advice do you have to give for all parties involved?
You know, we'll always say if there's a problem or if you have issues with the way you were treated by an officer, call and make a complaint. We can look into it and we'll see, what truly happened, or sometimes things come down to perception. Not making excuses, but sometimes maybe there's a way we can change our language, or maybe little things like that. We're imperfect too, so make a complaint. Work with the police department. Again, go in, introduce yourselves. And see what you can do to make things happen, and maybe bridge that misunderstanding between two groups. I think a lot of times I've said it before, we're afraid of what we don't know, but when you kind of get an idea of what you were afraid of, oftentimes you realize, you were afraid for no reason. And, I think a lot of our issues, even just across the nation at this point, could be solved by just a simple sitting down and talking with somebody and working through things.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. We have to get beyond the fear and really attempt to bridge some of those difficult. It may be difficult at first to establish communication, but then everybody benefits in the end.
Absolutely.
Another question is, what is the difference between CIT programs and mobile crisis units? Anybody have an answer for that one?
Hi, Brenda. In Worcester, we don't have a mobile crisis team anymore. We did, and that funding is gone. So mobile crisis units often have a social worker right along, and that funding is just not there. We had one. It had a peer worker, a social worker, and a police officer, and that was the team. Then there are other mobile crisis teams that are just run by mental health organizations, but we don't currently have any in Massachusetts. So the difference is, well, they're not police, and they're usually mental health professionals in mobile crisis teams. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now we have some chats coming in about kind of recognizing that everybody's a human being here, so that there are going to be some police officers who are easier to deal with. There's going to be some people going through crisis who are easier to deal with. But I also think it's important to recognize that I think the police have even more of a responsibility in the interaction because there is an inherent power differential, that obviously the police have the gun and have the power and the power to arrest, the power to detain. So that, to me, that gives the police even more responsibility in the interaction. But it's very true that what people are saying, that, everybody's a human being in the situation. So anybody want to comment on what I just said, which is basically like summarizing a chat that is happening right now?
Well, again, this is Brenda. I don't want to take up all the air, but I will say that's basically how we got connected, is by going there, recognizing their struggles and their power and all that, and coming at it from that direction, that we realize you, police officer, are human beings, and we don't expect you to have all the answers. And then they really softened and were able to talk to us from that perspective. And just to always use the term equal people with different roles, that's something we created where it really hits home that we are all equal people with different roles. I run a peer-run organization. I'm the director, but I'm an equal person with a different role, being the director role. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda, and please, thank you for commenting. You're not taking up too much space. We need to hear your comments. Thanks. Anybody else want to comment on that particular conversation, which I think is quite important? If not, then it looks like we're winding down in terms of the questions. We've had a great dialogue. I want to thank all of the presenters. It seems like we have figured out the technical issues, so apologize in advance for the recording, which is going to be a little rough at the beginning, but then we seem to have ironed everything out. And thank you very much again to Dwayne Mays, Brenda Vizina, Alan Green, and especially Sergeant John Walsh for coming on and engaging in this important conversation.
All guests have been unmuted. All guests have been unmuted. All guests have been muted. All guests have been muted. All guests have been unmuted. All guests have been muted.
Okay. Spoke too soon. Now the technical difficulties are coming back. So anyways, thanks again, and let's continue the conversation. That's the end of the webinar. Thanks for joining us.